All right, I'm following up on more of my TikTok requests. Let's talk about Ajani Goldmane. So Ajani is a Leonin from the Naya shard of Alara. You see, millennia ago, Alara was sundered into 5 different shards, each of which was devoid of 2 colors of mana. Naya was missing blue and black, and so instead became this beautiful built-up rainforest, full of kaiju called Gargantua, elves, humans, and Leonin. The Leonin were known as the Nicol, and they had sort of an Inca-like civilization in the mountains called the Cloud Nicol. But decades ago, there was a rift formed between the Cloud Nicol and a group called the Wild Nicol. The Wild Nicol left because of this schism, because they felt the Cloud Nicol were too restrictive, and went down to live in the valleys like their ancestors did. Ajani comes from one such clan, and his brother is the Ka of that clan, or the leader. Now, Ajani himself is sort of ostracized from the clan because he is a white-furred Leonin. But his life is actually pretty good up until his brother is murdered. The grief of this event causes Ajani's planeswalker spark to ignite, and he winds up on the Shard of Jund, where he meets Sarkhan Vol. And Sarkhan, in his own sort of rough way, mentors Ajani for a little while, teaching him how to planeswalk, that you have to kind of take a leap of faith. Now, I'm not going to get into the entire plot of the novel Alara Unbroken, but what Ajani comes to learn is that the man behind the schism between the 2 Nicol groups was in fact an agent of Nicol Bolas. And they ordered Jazal's death because Jazal had started to dig into the true history, and something called the Conflux was coming. The Conflux was the reunion of all 5 shards, and in order to sort of stoke a big magical well of energy, he could draw on Nicol Bolas, the Elder Dragon, stokes conflict on all the 5 shards, so there'd be a lot of war, a lot of magic being used to fuel the maelstrom that would come from the Conflux, the reunion of these shards. Along the way, Ajani is helped by another planeswalker named Elspeth Terrell from Bant, who helps nurse him back to health, and the 2 become close. Ajani continues his quest, which leads him to Nicol Bolas himself. And while Ajani can't defeat Nicol Bolas, he can scare him off, and he does so by using his soul magic to create like an avatar of Nicol Bolas's soul. There's this great subtext that comes into this later when you know about his relationship with Ugin, in that what must have startled him is that he had a spirit dragon that looked a lot like him suddenly appear. And that after Alara, his immediate next thing he does is go and deal with Zendikar to release the Eldrazi. But in any case, Ajani doesn't really know anything about any of that. Instead, he becomes sort of the planeswalker mentor that we know. Along the way, he had the chance to hurt people who had wronged him, and when he learns that the person who actually killed Jazal was his childhood friend Zaliki, who had believed that Marissi was like real and good and was just acting on his orders and didn't realize that Jazal would get killed, Ajani sort of abandons the path of vengeance. And he starts spending his time traveling the multiverse and meeting people. He helps out Elspeth several times, the first of which after she leaves Alara, and she has found herself in sort of a dark place on Dominaria, being a pit fighter. He brings back her armor and reminds her of who she is. And then later, when he learns she's in trouble on Theros, he comes to her aid along with the local Leonin of the plane. Elspeth's trouble leads to her death, and he is sort of left bereft. He starts wearing her cloak as a cape, in memorial to her. Now, it's during this time that he meets Tamiyo and the story circle, which includes Ajani, Narset, Tamiyo, and Elspeth. Although this isn't like a formal group. Ajani goes to Tamiyo and sort of has a breakdown. She and her family help build him back up, and he goes on a mission to sort of figure out what Nicol Bolas is up to next. Mainly by finding Tezzeret, who he knows from what Elspeth has previously told him is an agent of Bolas, and was on New Phyrexia with Elspeth. And in fact, he was helpful to Elspeth on New Phyrexia. That's a whole different story, though. This leads him to Avishkar, what was then called Kaladesh, where he meets the Gatewatch and joins them in helping overthrow Tezzeret's coup, helping to lead a revolution on the plane. Afterwards, Ajani warns the Gatewatch against confronting Bolas directly, while he goes off in search of more allies against whatever Bolas is planning. One of those allies is Joyra, who has recently rebuilt the Weatherlight. And that whole adventure recruits a resparked Teferi to the Gatewatch. Nicol Bolas's plan is revealed to be an invasion of Ravnica. Ajani is one of the first ones there to fight him. They rally the guilds to themselves, And without going into too much detail on the plot, they end up defeating Bolas by basically convincing Liliana to turn back against him. Nicol Bolas is defeated, everyone thinks he's dead, but in secret, Jace has, let Ugin take him to imprison him in the meditation realm. Then the Phyrexian invasion happens several years later. Ajani is completed in secret and becomes a sleeper agent working for Sheoldred. He ends up fighting against his old friends, but Elspeth saves him, and the damage to his body is undone thanks to a character named Melira. That's too much to get into right now. And that mostly catches us up. When we come back to Ajani, he has been living on Tarkir for basically the entire time since the invasion, living as a hermit. He is heavily scarred by what he was forced to do and the feelings, he feels like he enjoyed it, even though he knows that wasn't him. Uniting with a bunch of people from his past, including Elspeth and Narset and Sarkhan, helps sort of shake him out of his rut. And he comes to help stop the dragon storms, and is one of the first people who learns about Nicol Bolas' escape and Jace's death, deconstruction, whatever, in the meditation realm. That's the broad strokes history of Ajani. Now, he is a very patient person. He does not believe in killing if it can be avoided, because he can see into people's souls and he can see the goodness inside them, even if they're doing bad things. And he can pull that sort of power out of people. We see it manifest in a lot of different ways early on. In the wake of Shards of Alara, they wanted to make him the Ka of the Wild Nacatl, but he declined and put his friend Zaliki in charge instead. However, he still is sort of a kind mentor to his people and the youth, who all sort of idolize him now. He went from sort of this pariah among his people to he's like this myth, this legend that every young Leonin on Alara wants to be like. Anyway, one of the reasons I love Ajani is because he is like this almost 7 foot tall creature that could very easily be built purely for killing, but instead he's a pretty nice guy. He is ferocious when he needs to be, but he would prefer to sit and drink tea calmly. He develops these close, wonderful friendships with people, not just Elspeth. He's a friend and mentor to Chandra Nalaar as well, which out of the Gatewatch is the person he's closest with. And if it was up to him, he would spend his life just enjoying the beauty of the multiverse. But the multiverse ends up calling him up to action. One last note, his double-bladed axe is actually his axe and his brother Jazal's axe combined. He keeps the other blade with his axe in memorial to his brother.